My name is Amanda Everly. Yes, that Amanda Everly. And in just 3 months, I'll stand in the foyer of my brother's luxury apartment, hold up a velvet pouch of stolen heirlooms, and say to his sobbing fiancée, "You stole from our bloodline." That's the moment her perfect little con unravels. But it didn't start there. It started the night I ended a party that wasn't mine to begin with, or so everyone thought. Before I dive into that moment, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I want to know who's with me on this one. Because if you've ever been underestimated, written off, or treated like a footnote in your own family, then I think you'll understand why I did what I did. It was a Friday night, one of those unseasonably warm spring evenings that made the city feel alive, electric. The Langford Grand Hotel glowed like a jewel in the heart of Manhattan, its chandeliered ballroom flooded with champagne laughter and classical music from a string quartet. I arrived deliberately late. My sapphire gown clung to me like confidence and revenge. I knew every eye would turn the moment I entered. Not because I was the guest of honor, no, that title belonged to someone else, but because I was the unexpected variable, the outlier. The sister no one expected to show up, much less take control. "Wow," someone murmured as I stepped in. She actually came. I glided past a crowd of socialites and minor influencers, their perfume trailing behind them like secrets. The engagement party was for my younger brother, Caleb, and his fiancée, Madison Blake. She was poised, camera-ready, and apparently unbothered by my presence. Until I got closer. She turned from a circle of women, all wearing identically effortless hairstyles, and looked me up and down. Her lips curled into something venomous and practiced. Well, Amanda Everly, I didn't expect a neglected peasant to own satin. I felt the blood rise in my ears, but I smiled. That's the trick. You smile through the slap, then land your own harder. "I almost didn't come," I said, tilting my head. Realized this might be the last night I get to enjoy the company of a woman with such creative credentials. Her brows knit, confusion flickering, but she recovered quickly. "You don't belong here," she hissed, low and sharp. "This is my night." I looked past her, scanning the opulent crowd. Waiters with silver trays, a towering champagne tower, a live artist painting a scene of the party in real time. Caleb stood across the room, laughing with our parents, looking so proud. That's what made it worse. They all believed her story. The polished version of Madison who'd somehow convinced them she was the best thing to happen to our family. Too bad I already knew the real one. I took a breath, stepped forward, and walked straight toward the band. The quartet faltered as I passed them, unsure if they were being dismissed or sabotaged. I gave a subtle nod to the hotel manager, Mr. Rowe, who was standing at the side of the ballroom just as I'd instructed him hours before. Then I took the microphone from the podium near the head table. The moment my fingers wrapped around it, the music stopped. A ripple of confusion passed through the room. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, my voice echoing crisply off the vaulted ceilings. "I know you're all here to celebrate Madison and Caleb's engagement, and what a spectacle it is." I looked at Madison. She stared at me, lips parted, glass half raised, frozen. "But there's been a change of plans," I continued. "This party ends now." Laughter rippled through the room, nervous, uncertain. Madison took a step toward me. "Amanda, what the hell are you doing?" I met her eyes. "Reclaiming what's mine." Then slowly, deliberately, I turned to the manager. "Mr. Rowe," I said, "please clear the ballroom. The Langford Grand thanks you for attending, but this event has concluded." He didn't hesitate. Security moved in smoothly, politely directing guests toward the exit. Lights began to dim. The music didn't resume. Gasps filled the silence, followed by the scraping of chairs and the hurried clicking of heels across the marble floor. Madison turned red. "You can't do this. This isn't your hotel." I stepped off the stage and walked directly up to her, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "Yes, it is." Her mouth opened, then shut. For the first time since I'd met her, Madison Blake was speechless. I left her there, in the middle of the grand ballroom, surrounded by flower petals and confusion, as the guests streamed out and the music stayed dead. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. That was the moment the lies started cracking, and I had only just begun. We were high above the city now. The Langford's penthouse lounge, all velvet chairs and gold trim, gleamed around us like a museum of people pretending nothing just happened. But no one was pretending now. Caleb stood stiffly by the bar, jaw clenched. Our parents had taken center seating on the tufted cream sofa like royalty awaiting a grovel. I stayed by the windows, arms folded, letting the glitter of the skyline steady my nerves. The room smelled like roses and resentment. You humiliated us, my mother said first. Eleanor ever lie. Manhattan's favorite fundraiser. Designer dress, diamond earrings, and the coldest eyes I've ever seen. Do you even understand what you've done? I turned to face her. I ended a performance, one that didn't deserve an audience. My father's voice cut in heavy and scolding. This wasn't your call, Amanda. Wasn't it? I said, walking toward them. You held Caleb's engagement party in my hotel, didn't even realize it or didn't care. That's how invisible I've become to this family. My mother waved a hand dismissively. You manage some boutique floors here. That doesn't make you an owner. I am the owner, I replied. The Langford Grand was part of my third investment round. I bought controlling interest 6 months ago. Silence. Caleb turned, visibly stunned. You're lying, he said, not angrily, just like someone who had no idea what his sister actually did for a living. I almost laughed. Maybe if any of you ever asked me something other than "Are you dating anyone yet?" you'd know that. My mother leaned forward. Even if that were true, which I still don't believe, it doesn't justify hijacking your brother's special night. You're just jealous. Jealous, I echoed. She stood now, voice rising. Yes, because you're alone. You've got money, Amanda, but your life is empty. You have no one. That one landed harder than it should have. I felt it in my chest. Still, I didn't flinch. I steadied myself, then looked her dead in the eye. I've never been more full, I said quietly. Because I finally have the truth. Caleb stepped forward, eyes dark. You think you know Madison, you don't know her at all. No, I agreed. I know more than you do, that's the problem. You're being paranoid, my father snapped. You've always had a flair for drama, but tonight crossed a line. I didn't respond, I just walked toward the elevator. Don't you dare walk away from this conversation, my mother barked. I paused with my hand on the call button. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. No, I said over my shoulder. I used to think if I worked hard enough, made myself successful enough, you'd see me. Not tolerate me, see me. The elevator dinged. I'm done waiting for that. My father rose, his voice echoing behind me. If you walk out that door, Amanda, you're no longer part of this family. The doors slid open. I turned around, met each of their faces. Then I guess I never really was. And I stepped in. As the elevator descended, I felt my whole body trembling. The kind of shaking you only get after a storm you've tried holding in too long. But I wasn't crying. Not yet. Some heartbreaks don't hit with tears. They hit with silence. With the knowledge that you spoke the truth and no one in that room wanted to hear it. My office in Tribeca is a space I designed to breathe in. Floor-to-ceiling windows, warm wood floors, and art that reminded me I built something real, something enduring. No family name handed me this view. I fought for every inch of it. Which made it all the more insulting when she barged in uninvited. The glass doors slammed against the wall. Nice place, Madison Blake announced, strutting in like she owned the lease. You always did love pretending. I didn't look up right away. I kept signing the lease agreement on my desk for the new Soho property. Let her wait. Finally, I set the pen down, looked up, and met her eyes. Security let you through? I asked calmly. She smirked. I said I was family. That word again. Madison was dressed for war. Blood-red heels, silk blouse just shy of scandalous, and an expression as brittle as a porcelain doll left too long in the sun. She didn't sit, just circled my office slowly, dragging her fingertips across the bookshelf, my desk, the awards on the wall. You know, it's almost sad, she said. How you're so desperate to be something. I stayed still, watching, listening. Last night, that was cute, she continued. Your brother's engagement party because you couldn't handle not being center stage. Very middle child of trauma vibes. Her voice dripped with fake concern. But let me guess, now you'll start claiming you're protecting him, right? That I'm some conniving little gold digger, please. I stood. You came here, I said, to what, scare me? No, she said with a laugh. I came here to see what failure looks like when it's dressed up in diamonds. She leaned in, eyes narrowed. How does it feel, Amanda? To be unwanted trash with a title. That was the moment. The exact moment her mask slipped. The word trash hung in the air between us. I tilted my head, taking in the venom in her voice. The way she said it so easily, like she had been waiting years to say it to someone who wouldn't immediately slap her for it. You think owning a hotel makes you someone, she added. But you're just a sad little woman playing boss in a borrowed world. I stepped around the desk slowly. I'd rather be alone with integrity, I said, my voice low and controlled, than surrounded by liars clapping for a life they stole. Her jaw clenched, just for a second, but I saw it. That flicker of recognition, that I wasn't reacting, that I wasn't folding. Now, I continued, get out. She laughed again, but it was thinner this time. You really think you can control how this ends? I don't have to control anything, I said. You'll reveal yourself, you already are. She rolled her eyes, turning to leave. Oh, and Madison, I said casually, pressing the intercom button on my desk. Marcus, please escort Ms. Blake out. Make sure she's added to the non-entry list. The door opened behind her almost instantly. My head of security, Marcus, stepped in tall, calm, intimidating without trying. You're kicking me out, she asked, that brittle confidence cracking. I didn't answer. I just gave a soft flick of my fingers, dismissed. She stared at me for a beat longer, then flipped her hair and strutted out. But not before I caught it, the tiniest stumble in her gait. The way her hand trembled as she adjusted her purse strap. She was scared. Good, because I wasn't just a sister anymore. I was her reckoning. It was a Thursday afternoon that felt like a Sunday. Rain streaked down the windows of my loft, the city humming low and distant behind it. I sat barefoot on my velvet emerald couch, one hand gripping a glass of white wine, the other holding the remote like it had wronged me personally. Layla was sprawled beside me in her usual spot, legs tucked under her, a silk scarf tied around her head like she was midway through a Paris escape fantasy. You sure you want to watch this? She asked, side-eyeing the flat screen like it might explode. No, I replied. But I'm doing it anyway. The channel was one of those lifestyle networks obsessed with opulence. Airs once never again exclusives of weddings so extravagant they bordered on satire. And there it was, Langford Legacy, the wedding of Madison Blake and Caleb Everly. Layla winced. They used your family name as the headline. Of course they did, I muttered. It makes her look like she belongs. The broadcast had all the makings of a rom-com finale. A string quartet played softly while drone footage panned over the rooftop garden where the ceremony was unfolding. Everything looked expensive, curated, perfect. There was Caleb, my brother, my once closest friend, standing stiffly beside his groomsmen, smiling but not quite reaching his eyes. And then her. Madison glided down the aisle like she was floating on compliments and filtered lighting. The crowd oohed. Cameras snapped. Even the officiant looked starstruck. I said it before I could stop myself. They didn't even invite me. Layla turned to look at me but didn't say anything yet. She waited, let the moment land. I stared at the screen. Not a phone call, not a text, nothing, like I don't exist. You didn't need to be there, she finally said. That's not the point. Exactly, she said, setting down her wine. The point is they wanted to erase you, quietly. So they could build their fake little empire without the one person who knows it's made of wet paper. I let out a sharp breath, the kind that starts as a laugh but doesn't make it all the way. I keep wondering if I overreacted, I admitted. If taking the mic, kicking them out of the ballroom if it was too much. Layla turned to me, expression serious now. Amanda, she called you trash in your own hotel. I looked down at my lap. I just thought maybe, after all this time, they'd see it. That I wasn't trying to ruin anything, I was trying to protect Caleb. You were trying to wake him up, she said. And maybe he's still asleep, but that doesn't mean you were wrong. The screen shifted to a close-up of Madison beaming as she slid a ring onto Caleb's finger. He looked dazed, off, like he knew something was wrong but didn't know how to name it. I whispered, he looks like he's being drafted. Layla snorted. They probably promised him legacy perks if he just smiled and didn't ask questions. We both stared at the screen for a moment longer. Then Layla turned to me again, her voice quieter but firmer now. You can't let this end like that. I looked at her. Madison just married into your name, Amanda. She's selling herself as the new face of a family she almost destroyed. And you're just supposed to sip wine and cry in designer socks. I cracked a faint smile. They are nice socks. She reached over, squeezed my hand. This isn't over, not if you don't want it to be. I felt something shift in my chest. The grief didn't disappear, it just made room for something else, something sharper, resolve. They thought they could freeze me out, erase me from the narrative. They forgot one thing. I don't disappear quietly. I met Drew Halston at a quiet cafe in Brooklyn where the tables were scratched, the coffee was strong, and no one cared who you were. That was always Drew's rule, places where secrets didn't echo. He was already there when I arrived, jacket slung over the chair, eyes scanning the room like habit, not paranoia. Drew had been my friend before he was my investigator, back when we both believed truth alone could fix things. Please tell me you're not about to ask me to follow a cheating boyfriend, he said as I sat down. I gave a humorless smile. Worse, my brother married her. That got his attention. Okay, he said slowly. I'm listening. I wrapped my hands around the mug the server had just set down. Her name is Madison Blake, at least that's what she's calling herself now. Drew raised an eyebrow. Now, she's polished, too polished, no old friends, no childhood stories that stick. She slips up with details, places, timelines, and when she's angry it's like the mask cracks. Drew leaned back. You think she's hiding something? I know she is, I said. I just don't know what yet. He studied my face for a moment. You're not doing this for revenge. No, I said without hesitation. I'm doing it because she's dangerous. He nodded once. All right, I'll dig, but if I find nothing, you won't, I cut in. And when you do, I want everything. Drew smiled faintly. That's the Amanda I remember. 3 days passed, then 4. On the 5th night my phone rang just after midnight. I answered on the 2nd ring. You found something. Drew chuckled softly. I found a lot. I sat up straight. Talk to me. Madison Blake doesn't exist, he said. Not really, not on paper. My pulse thudded in my ears. She's used at least 4 aliases over the last 10 years, he continued. Different last names. Slightly altered birthdays, clean enough to pass casual checks. Not clean enough to survive me, I swallowed. What kind of aliases? Engagement aliases, he said. Fiancée, girlfriend, almost wife. Wealthy men Amanda, older, connected. She embeds herself, mirrors their families, their values. Then she siphons. My grip tightened on the phone. Money, jewelry, access, and when things get uncomfortable she vanishes. I closed my eyes. There was a conviction in Nevada, Drew added. Pled down, fraud, a man who didn't want his reputation dragged through court. My voice was steady when I spoke. Send me everything. Oh, I will, he said, but there's more. Of course there was. She targets families with assets and legacy properties, Drew said. Hotels, real estate, trusts. Old money with blind spots. A chill crept down my spine. She didn't just marry your brother by accident, he finished. She hunted him, I exhaled slowly. So she underestimated me. She didn't account for you at all, Drew replied, which is usually how people like her get caught. I stared into the dark of my apartment, heart pounding but not with fear, with clarity. Drew, I said quietly, this stays between us for now. Of course, he replied. But Amanda? Yes, be careful. Women like her don't panic when exposed, they escalate. I smiled to myself, slow and deliberate. So do I. 3 days after Drew's call, I was back at the Langford Grand, not as the disgraced sister who'd hijacked a party, but as the majority owner with a quiet mission. The place looked the same as always. Marble floors buffed to a glow, concierge smiles tight and trained, bellboys gliding past with perfectly aligned luggage carts. But now, everything felt different. Now I knew what I was looking for. I took the elevator to the administrative floor, where Martin Kane, the hotel's longtime manager, waited in my corner office. He was in his usual navy suit, glasses perched at the edge of his nose, sipping tea like nothing ever rattled him. You said this was urgent, he asked as I stepped in. Close the door, please. He raised a brow but did as I asked. I moved behind my desk and opened the security footage database on the large monitor mounted on the wall. I need to review guest footage from Suite 1402. Martin hesitated. That's the suite Mr. Caleb Everly and Ms. Blake used during the engagement weekend. Exactly, I said, clicking through to the archived surveillance. I'd like to view footage from the morning after the party. He gave me a curious glance. Permission granted. I own the building, I said flatly. But yes, permission granted. Within moments, the screen showed a high-definition clip from the corridor outside Suite 1402. Time-stamped, muted. I watched Madison step into frame, alone, perfectly made up in a white satin robe. She glanced both ways, then turned and looked directly at the security camera, smiling, almost posing. Martin leaned forward. That's unsettling. Keep watching. She turned back toward the door, holding it open with one heel while rummaging through a large tote bag. Then, without hesitation, she reached inside the suite, plucked two of the hotel's monogram towels from a brass rack just inside the doorway, folded them, and tucked them into her bag. Not quickly, not nervously, like she was entitled to them. Martin let out a stunned laugh. Seriously, she's stealing towels from the hotel she's marrying into. I didn't laugh. I leaned in, eyes locked on the screen, watching as she adjusted the bag on her shoulder and calmly strolled down the hall. This isn't about towels, I said quietly. It's about the cracks. Martin turned to me confused. Cracks, I nodded slowly. People like her slip when they think they're untouchable. The big cons are built on 1,000 little habits. This, I pointed at the screen as Madison disappeared into the elevator, is how she gets caught, not by what she plans, by what she thinks no one's watching. Martin crossed his arms, frowning now. So, what are you saying? That she's what, a grifter? I turned to him, considering how much to reveal. Let's just say I have reason to believe she's not who she claims to be, and this footage, it's just the beginning. He nodded slowly, still absorbing it. You want a copy? I want 5, I said, 2 on encrypted drives. 1 sent directly to my private investigator. He blinked. You're really going after her? I looked him dead in the eye. I'm protecting what's mine. He nodded, his usual aloof demeanor replaced by something more serious. I'll have it ready by end of day. As he left, I sat back in my chair and stared at the frozen frame on the screen, Madison's perfectly manicured fingers slipping a towel into her $1,000 tote like it was hers by right. This wasn't the crime. This was the tell. And Madison Blake, whatever her real name was, had just handed me her first mistake. The Midtown precinct smelled like overworked printers, bad coffee, and quiet skepticism. I walked in carrying a slim leather folder and a flash drive, dressed like I was headed to a board meeting, because I was done being underestimated. Behind the front desk, a bored-looking officer barely glanced up. Need to file a report. Actually, I said, I have probable cause to open a fraud investigation, and I was told to speak with Officer Lynn Crawford. That name did the trick. His posture straightened, eyes flicked to the screen, then back to me with new curiosity. She's in room B, I'll let her know you're here. Room B was one of those side rooms where nothing good happened unless someone brought receipts. I brought receipts. Officer Crawford entered 3 minutes later. She was lean, late 40s, sharp in that lived-it-seen-it kind of way. No time for nonsense. I respected that. You're Amanda Everly, she said as she slid into the chair across from me. The hotel owner, I've heard your name. Good, then let's make this easier. I handed her the flash drive and opened the folder. The footage is from Langford Grand Hotel surveillance, time-stamped and unedited. The notes detail what you're about to see, along with names, locations, and a preliminary link to a past fraud conviction in Nevada under the name Madeline Barnes, alias used by the same woman, currently going by Madison Blake. Crawford plugged in the drive, adjusted the monitor, and hit play. We both sat in silence as Madison's little performance unfolded, white robe, effortless posture, and then the calm, deliberate theft of 2 monogrammed towels. Halfway through the clip, Crawford snorted. By the time Madison disappeared into the elevator, she was full-on laughing. Towels? She asked, raising an eyebrow at me. This is how you're coming for her. This, I said, calmly crossing my legs, is how we get her to slip. The towels are the crack in the marble. Crawford leaned back, still smiling. I've had people try to bring down cons with missing Rolexes, forged titles, offshore accounts, but this. Towels, I repeated with a shrug. They're not the point, but they're the moment, the mistake, the thing she didn't think would matter. Crawford nodded, the humor fading into something sharper. You're serious about this? Dead serious. She pulled a legal pad from her folder and jotted something down. And you said there's a past conviction? Yes, pled down to misdemeanor fraud. Sealed file from Nevada, but my investigator has enough breadcrumbs to open it back up if need be. Witnesses? Not yet, but I have a theory about where her previous aliases might resurface. Men she left behind with shredded finances and reputations too proud to speak up. But this time she married in. Crawford looked up. So you're saying this is ongoing? She's married to my brother, I said, which means she now has access to family assets. Financial, historical, even legal power if my parents pass. This is a long game, and she's been playing it for years. Crawford stared at me, then tapped her pen thoughtfully. Okay, you want us to pursue this, we'll need a little more, a pattern, proof of deception beyond theft. But I'll be honest, this footage, it's gold. People underestimate what petty can prove. A smile tugged at my lips. She underestimated me, I said. And that's how she gets caught. Crawford nodded slowly. You've got teeth, Amanda. I've got a case, I replied. She stood, gathering the folder and the drive. Let me run this through Intel. If even a third of what's in here checks out, we'll open a file. Until then, keep everything, keep it documented. And if she makes a move— She already did, I said. She married the wrong family. Crawford paused at the door, gave me one last look. Towels, she muttered, shaking her head with a grin, might just unravel the whole damn show. The duck was glazed with orange zest and lacquered to perfection. The kind of meal that wanted you to believe everything on the surface was elegant, controlled, and not slowly rotting underneath. Madison had gone all out. A long, sleek table, crystal glasses sparkling under chandelier light, and soft jazz humming from the corner speaker. She wore a cream silk blouse, diamond studs, and a smile sharpened to a knife's edge. And there we were, Caleb, my parents, and me. A picture of unity if you ignored the tension wrapped around the room like invisible thread. This is nice, my mother said, swirling her wine. So much calmer than, well, you know. Madison laughed lightly, placing her hand over Caleb's. I'm just happy to have us all here, healing, moving forward. I didn't respond. Caleb caught my eye, offering me a hesitant smile. One that asked, can we pretend long enough to survive dinner? And I might have let him have that, might have smiled back. Until the doorbell rang. 3 sharp chimes. Madison's hand froze mid-reach toward the bread basket. Did you order something, love? No, Caleb said slowly, standing up. My father glanced toward the door, a wrinkle forming between his brows. Then came the knock, firm, unapologetic, knock, knock, knock. Caleb walked toward the foyer and pulled the door open. Caleb ever lie? A voice asked. Yes, Detective Ray's NYPD. We have a warrant to search this residence. I stood from my chair just as Madison rose so quickly her wine glass tipped, shattering against the hardwood. Excuse me, she breathed, voice tight. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, followed by a detective holding a folder. He nodded toward the living room. Everyone, please remain where you are while we carry out the search. What the hell is going on? Caleb asked, voice rising as the officers moved in with quiet efficiency. One officer headed toward the bedroom. Another opened drawers in the hallway credenza. No, you can't just barge in here, Madison snapped, stepping in front of one officer. This is outrageous, Caleb, tell them to leave. I cleared my throat. Everyone turned. I was standing just inside the hallway, arms crossed, coat still buttoned. I gave them probable cause, I said evenly. They're not here on a hunch. Madison's face lost all color. Me, I said. And the towels were just the beginning. Caleb looked between us, completely lost. What is this, Amanda, what's going on? Madison's voice turned frantic. She's trying to ruin me, she's obsessed. She faked all this, Caleb, I told you she was unstable. She's the one who called the cops? My father asked, now rising to his feet. Yes, I answered calmly. I brought them evidence that your new daughter-in-law has a history of fraud, 4 aliases, and a sealed conviction in Nevada. The room went still. From the hallway, one of the officers called out, Detective, you'll want to see this. Ray's headed toward the bedroom. Madison gripped the edge of the dining table like she was trying not to fall. Caleb stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Amanda, what are you talking about? She married you for your name, your legacy, your money, I said, voice trembling just slightly, but not from fear. And if you still think this is about towels, Caleb, you're not just blind, you're choosing it. The detective returned, holding something in his gloved hands. We found this in a false bottom drawer, he said. Jewelry, some vintage, not on your registry. Madison's mouth opened and closed like she couldn't find the script. Caleb slowly backed away from her. My mother's glass shook in her hand. I told you, I said, my voice low but steady. She doesn't make mistakes because she's clumsy. She makes them because she thinks no one's watching. Madison's eyes locked on mine. Gone was the polished hostess. Gone was the charming wife. All that remained was the con woman caught mid-performance. And me, the woman who had handed her the curtain call. The hallway was narrow, but somehow the tension made it feel tighter. My mother stormed out of the dining room, heels stabbing the floor with each step, followed closely by my father, whose usually calm face had darkened into something hard and unfamiliar. How dare you, my mother hissed, grabbing my wrist just as I reached the arch between the foyer and the living room. Her voice was a rasp of pure rage, low enough that the officers wouldn't hear but sharp enough to cut. You humiliated this family in front of the police. No, I said, carefully pulling free. Madison did that, I just refused to help her cover it up. My father stepped in, voice like cold steel. Amanda, this was not your place. If you had concerns, you should have come to us. I did, I snapped, turning to face them both. You didn't listen. You dismissed me. You called me jealous. You cut me out of my own brother's wedding and told me I wasn't family anymore. My mother opened her mouth to reply, but I wasn't finished. She stole from my hotel, I said, lifting my chin. Towels, yes, and if that sounds petty to you, you're not paying attention. That wasn't theft, it was a signal. The kind people like her give off right before they set the whole house on fire. My father's jaw worked, but still he said nothing. She's been married before. 4 times, 4 names, 4 trails of wreckage she quietly slipped away from. You're speculating, my mother snapped. I pulled the file from my coat and opened it between them. No, I'm documenting. Inside, mugshots, name change filings, property transfers, sealed court documents flagged by Drew's investigation. It was all there, proof not just of deception, but of a pattern. She used the name Madeline Barnes in Nevada, I said, flipping to a printed record of the fraud conviction. She defrauded a real estate investor out of $70,000, convinced his assistant to funnel money to a fake foundation, then ghosted them both after a plea deal sealed her record. She was barely 20 then, my father muttered, glancing down at the paper. I raised an eyebrow. So that makes it forgivable. It makes it a mistake, he said, though with less certainty. She didn't just make a mistake, I replied. She refined it. From the other room, I heard a crash. Not violent, just the unmistakable sound of someone losing the ability to hold themselves up. I stepped past my parents and turned the corner. Madison was sitting on the floor, back against the buffet cabinet, her knees pulled up, fingers trembling around the edge of her dress. Her face was white, lips parted, eyes empty. For the first time, she wasn't trying to perform. She wasn't trying to lie. She was calculating, trying to figure out what I had, and how much worse it could get. I stood over her and crouched slowly, opening the file in front of her. You should have walked away, I said quietly. You should have cut your losses and vanished like you always do. She didn't answer. But you got greedy, I added. You thought Caleb was weak. You thought I was weak. Still nothing. I wonder how many times you've done this. How many names you've collected like masks. How many families you've broken just because no one stood in your way long enough to make it inconvenient. Madison finally looked up. Her voice cracked when she spoke. You don't understand, she whispered. I was surviving, I blinked. No, I said, you were hunting. Behind me, my mother's voice was barely audible now. Amanda, I didn't turn around. I didn't need to, because in that moment no apology would matter, no justification, no sudden regret. The truth was on the floor now, filed, printed, proven, and there was no going back. Detective Reyes. One of the officers called from the living room, holding something in his gloved hand. You'll want to see this. I rose slowly from where I'd been crouched beside Madison. She didn't stop me. She didn't move at all, just sat there, staring into the distance like if she went still enough, she might disappear. I walked toward the living room, heart thudding quietly but firmly in my chest. Reyes took the object from the officer and turned to face me. He held up a small, deep blue velvet pouch, its drawstrings pulled tight. A little aged, a little too familiar, my breath caught. Where did you find that? I asked. False bottom jewelry box in the bedroom closet. It was under a tray of designer earrings. Reyes loosened the drawstrings and opened the pouch. He turned it slightly, letting the contents slide into his palm. 2 delicate earrings. Teardrop pearls wrapped in vintage silver. And a small gold locket with an intricate engraving of wild violets, our grandmother's favorite flower. I stepped forward slowly, feeling the weight of history tug at my throat. That locket, I murmured. It belonged to my grandmother. I hadn't seen it in years. It disappeared after she passed, and we'd all assumed it was lost, maybe donated by accident, maybe misplaced during the estate clearing. But I remembered wearing it once when I was 16. I remembered her hands on my shoulders in the mirror. Caleb walked over, blinking rapidly. That can't be hers. He reached for the locket, held it up to the light, turned it over, then gasped. I never gave her these, he said, almost to himself. I didn't even know we still had them. Behind us, there was a sudden shuffle and then Madison's voice cracked through the quiet like a splintering mirror. I didn't mean to. Everyone turned. She stood at the threshold between the hallway and living room now. hands trembling, cheeks flushed with something that wasn't quite shame. Not yet. I didn't steal them, she insisted. I saw them in the drawer at your family's lake house during the holidays, and I thought, her voice quivered, I thought if I wore something meaningful, they'd finally accept me. I just wanted to look good in front of your family. Caleb turned to stone. You took Grandma Helen's locket, he said, voice thick. You didn't ask, you didn't even tell me, you just took it. Madison took a step forward, mascara starting to run. Caleb, please, but I stepped in front of him, steady and unshaking. You didn't steal jewelry, I said, voice like glass. You stole from our bloodline. She blinked at me. You wore our history like it was your costume, I added. You used it to buy affection you didn't earn, and you would have kept it hidden forever if no one had pulled back the curtain. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but it was clear, she wasn't crying out of guilt. She was crying because she was caught. Ray's nodded to his team. Tag it, we'll list this under property recovery. My mother sat back on the armrest, hand to her mouth, silent for the first time all night. My father looked at me, then at Madison. He said nothing, but he didn't need to. The final string had snapped. And the performance was officially over. The courtroom wasn't packed, but it buzzed. Press sat in the back rows, their notepads ready, lenses long and hungry. Spectators whispered like this was a show they'd been waiting to see staged live. Madison sat at the defense table, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were bone white. Her designer suit couldn't hide the way she was unraveling. Her lawyer leaned in every few minutes, whispering, coaxing. She nodded, eyes glassy but dry. She'd rehearsed the look of remorse, but not the feeling. I sat 2 rows behind the prosecution bench, between Drew and Caleb. Caleb hadn't said much since the night the heirloom was recovered. He'd stayed in our parents' guest house, then checked into a hotel near his office the day after. And though he hadn't asked me to be here, I knew he needed someone in his corner, even if it was the sister who had dragged the truth out into the light. Judge Mason was known for being fair but sharp. She entered briskly, robe sweeping, and sat with authority that didn't need volume to carry weight. This court has reviewed the evidence, heard the statements, and considered the plea deal presented, she began, scanning the room with eyes that cut through pretense. Given the defendant's prior sealed conviction, the calculated nature of her actions, and the emotional manipulation of multiple parties, this court is prepared to render sentencing. I glanced at Madison. Her lips were parted, waiting, terrified. Madison Blake, also known as Madeline Barnes, Marla Douglas, and Jane Wilder, the judge recited, you are hereby sentenced to 12 months in county custody, suspended under the condition of full restitution, mandatory fraud rehabilitation, and restriction from engaging in any financial or managerial role for 5 years. Gasps echoed through the room. But not from me. She wouldn't serve jail time. I knew that was likely. Her lawyer had worked the plea bargain like a maestro. But what mattered wasn't the sentence, it was the exposure. The mask was off, and the record would never be sealed again. I'm sorry, Madison suddenly cried out, her voice echoing. I never meant to hurt anyone, I was just trying to survive. The judge didn't blink. Regret after exposure is not accountability, Ms. Blake. Consider this your one and only grace. Caleb turned to me slowly. His eyes were red. I was blind, he whispered, voice cracking. Amanda. I didn't want to see it, I'm so sorry. I reached over and placed a hand on his shoulder, gentle, solid, the kind of comfort we used to offer each other without thinking when we were kids hiding from storms under the stairs. I didn't want revenge, I said quietly. I just wanted the truth. And now here it was, plain, unignorable. The gavel struck once. Case closed. As cameras began to flash, reporters stirred, and attorneys packed up, I stood and straightened my blazer. The heels I wore echoed across the marble floor, sharp, steady, unapologetic. Not rushed. Not running, just walking out the way I came in, with my head high and the truth at my back. The dining room felt smaller than I remembered. It wasn't the space, it was the silence. Not heavy, just cautious. The kind of quiet that sits between people who know they've let something important fracture. And now they're trying to figure out how to hold it again without dropping it. My mother had set the table herself. No caterers. No linen napkins folded like origami swans. Just roasted chicken, a modest bottle of wine, and store-bought apple pie warming in the oven. Real, honest, almost like an apology in roast form. Caleb sat to my right, spinning his fork between his fingers like he used to do as a kid when he was trying to say something difficult. Across from us, my father cleared his throat but didn't speak. For once, it was Caleb who broke the silence. I filed for divorce this morning, he said, his voice steady but quiet. No one moved. He kept his eyes on his plate as he added, she tried to get ahead of it, claimed emotional abuse, filed a statement full of things she hoped would twist the narrative. But I gave the court your file, Amanda, everything, dates, names, footage, and they saw it for what it was. My mother inhaled sharply but said nothing. Caleb finally looked at me. You were the only one who saw clearly. I didn't respond right away. My hand rested on my water glass, fingers tapping gently. I thought about everything it took to get to this table. Everything I lost, trust, closeness, the illusion that my family would always take my side without needing proof, and everything I'd gained back. I didn't enjoy being right, I said softly. I know, Caleb replied, and I didn't enjoy being wrong. A beat passed, then quietly my father spoke. We failed you. His voice was gravel and regret. We let charm outweigh character. And we let you carry the weight of truth alone. My mother blinked hard, then reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. I was cruel, she said. I thought you were acting out. I didn't want to believe someone could be that manipulative, not to Caleb, not to us, but I see it now and I'm sorry. The silence held for a moment more. Then Caleb raised his glass. To Amanda. I blinked, startled. To me, he nodded. To the only person in the room who refused to be fooled. Who told the truth even when we hated hearing it. My mother followed, lifting her own glass. To your strength. My father added his in silence, eyes meeting mine, not proud but sincere. I lifted mine last. To truth, I said, and to healing. We clinked glasses. The mood stayed soft, a little awkward, yes, but healing. Like scar tissue finally being acknowledged instead of ignored. Over pie, we laughed tentatively at first, then more freely. My father asked about the hotel renovations. Caleb teased my outdated phone. My mother told a story about Grandma Helen's obsession with saving every receipt from the 1980s, and we all groaned together like we used to. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about this family ever would be again. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The sun slanted through the trees in that golden, late afternoon way that makes everything feel a little softer. It was one of those rare New England days, where the humidity had taken a day off, and the breeze was just enough to keep the flies from landing on the potato salad. I stood on the back deck of my parents' country house in Connecticut, watching Caleb flip burgers at the grill, laughing as my father gave him unsolicited advice about charcoal that hadn't changed since the 90s. My mother, wearing a sun hat 3 sizes too big, poured lemonade like it was a sacred duty. And for the first time in years maybe, I wasn't watching it all through glass, I was in it, whole. Hey, Caleb said, wiping his hands on a towel and nodding toward the garden. There's someone I want you to meet. I followed him across the lawn, past a gaggle of little cousins playing tag with a water hose, and a makeshift picnic setup scattered with folding chairs and colorful blankets. She was sitting under the dogwood tree, legs crossed, a paperback open in her lap. She looked up as we approached, and the first thing I noticed wasn't how beautiful she was, it was how unafraid she looked, comfortable in her skin, no show, no script. Elise, Caleb said with a warmth I hadn't seen on his face in years. This is my sister, Amanda. She stood quickly, brushing grass from her sundress, and without hesitation, wrapped her arms around me in a hug that was real, not rehearsed. I've wanted to meet you for so long, she said, pulling back just enough to look at me. He told me everything about Madison, the wedding, the investigation, the courtroom. I raised an eyebrow. Everything, she nodded, everything. I glanced at Caleb, who gave a small shrug like, yeah, I didn't hold back. Elise smiled, but her eyes were soft. Thank you for saving him. I hadn't expected those words to hit me so hard. They landed low and deep, somewhere I didn't realize still needed healing. I let out a quiet breath. Just take care of each other. We do, she said. We're not perfect, but it's honest. And that's more than enough for both of us. We stood there in a moment of easy silence, the kind that comes when nothing needs fixing. Back at the grill, laughter broke out again as my dad accidentally dropped a hot dog and blamed it on uneven deck boards. My mom was rolling her eyes and handing out paper towels. Elise tugged Caleb's hand. Come on, your mom's going to burn the corn if you don't rescue it. He chuckled, gave me a playful salute, and jogged back across the lawn. Elise lingered beside me for another beat. You're not what I expected, she said, smiling. Good or bad? Better, she replied. A lot better. Then she jogged after Caleb, barefoot in the grass. I stood there for a minute longer, watching the family swirl around the picnic tables, the food, the music, the joy, not perfect, but real. And as I turned back toward the house, I felt something loosen inside me, something that had been knotted tight for far too long. I smiled, not because the storm had passed, but because I had finally stopped carrying the lightning.